Hey everyone, it's Taehyung. I wanted to talk to you today, really talk not about schedules, not about performances, not about headlines, but about me. About everything that's been happening behind the scenes, the moments I've kept to myself, and the feelings I haven't shared because I thought I had to be strong. Always. I know you've been there for me through every stage, every song, every laugh, every tear, and I felt it every bit of your support, your love, your patience. So today, I want to share something deeply personal, something that's been growing inside me for a long time, something that changed the way I see myself and maybe the way we connect. I am moving out of Korea. And I know that sounds sudden, maybe even confusing, but before you worry or jump to conclusions, I want you to hear the story behind it. I want you to understand why this is a step I need to take, not away from you, not away from the people I love, but toward becoming the version of myself I've been searching for. This isn't easy for me to say, and I know it won't be easy for anyone who hears it. But I promise, every word I share today comes from the heart. This is my journey, my truth, and I want you to come along with me because even from afar, you've always been part of it. It's measured by who loosens their grip when they know you need to fly. Leaving Korea isn't running away, it's returning to myself. And the people who truly love me already understand that there's a kind of grief that doesn't come from losing something, but from realizing you've outgrown it. It's quiet, it doesn't scream or break or collapse. It just sits inside you, heavy and patient, waiting for acknowledgement. For years, I buried that grief under gratitude, under duty, under love, and under the fear of disappointing the people who shaped my life. Ignoring it didn't make it disappear. It simply waited, growing heavier until silence was no longer enough. The night everything shifted began like any other another predictable day in a long line of days that blurred into each other. We had been filming for hours, exhausted but still performing because that's what we do. We give energy even when it's gone. I came home, dropped my bag, and collapsed onto the couch. The room was quiet, but my mind was louder than ever. Thoughts ricocheted inside me, bouncing between fear and clarity, loyalty and longing, who I was and who I needed to become. I didn't notice the tears at first, not dramatic sobbing, not loud despair, just a quiet wetness on my palms. My heart had decided to speak without asking permission, and I hadn't even realized it. Maybe I knew why I was crying, but I had been pretending not to. Then my phone buzzed. Jungkook. One word. Taehyung. That word carried weight as it always did. It could mean concern, longing, irritation, or nothing at all. With him, tone hides in the spaces between letters. I didn't respond. He called immediately, and I picked up. Neither of us said anything at first. I could hear him breathing on the other end, steady but tense, preparing for whatever truth lay behind my silence. Where are you? He finally asked. At home, alone? Yes. Can I come over? I almost said no, not because I didn't want him there, but because I knew he would see everything I'd been hiding. Jungkook doesn't need explanations. He reads emotion with instinct, like some people read music. I wasn't ready to be read, but saying no to him has never been easy. Come, I whispered. He arrived faster than I expected. No knock, no hesitation. He walked in like my space was his space, and his presence needed no permission. When he saw my face, his expression shifted, worry sharpened his eyes. He didn't ask why I was crying or what happened. He just sat beside me, close enough that our knees brushed, and waited. That's the thing about Jungkook. He doesn't push, he lets silence work until the truth surfaces. Eventually, I exhaled shakily. I can't keep doing this. Doing what? He asked. Living a life that doesn't fit me anymore. His gaze stayed locked on mine, searching for the truth beneath my words. Are you talking about Korea? He asked softly. I nodded. For the first time that night, he looked away, jaw tight, not in anger, but in fear. Fear of what my answer meant. Fear of what the future meant for him. How long have you felt this way? He asked. Longer than I want to admit, I swallowed. Why didn't you tell me? Because you're the one person whose presence I try to protect myself from. Loving you makes this decision more complicated than anyone else could understand. I didn't say more. I didn't want to hurt him. Silence returned, heavier this time, filled with every unspoken emotion between us. Love, longing, fear, the shifting future. When he finally looked back, eyes glossy but not crying, he whispered, If you leave, what happens to us? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his question settle on my shoulders. We don't disappear, I said. We adapt. What if adaptation becomes distance? He whispered. What if we become memories instead of reality? My chest tightened. That won't happen, promise. He shook his head. Too much hope, not enough certainty. Leaving Korea meant entering a life neither of us could predict. Phone calls would replace proximity. Plane rides would replace presence. Healing might take me further from him instead of back. Staying out of fear wasn't love. Staying because he begged me would eventually turn into resentment toward him, toward Korea, toward myself, and he deserved more than that. We both did. He leaned back on the couch, pressing the heels of his palms into his eyes. I don't want you to go, he said, voice cracking. But I don't want you to stay if you're hurting. That was the hardest truth. That was love in its most painful, most honest form. When he looked at me again, he whispered something that broke me completely. If you have to leave, then let me be the reason you come back. Something inside me fractured and settled at the same time. Jungkook always had a way of cutting through the noise and reaching the core of things. He didn't ask me to cancel my decision. He didn't try to change my mind. He didn't beg me to choose him over myself. He simply wanted to stay connected to the version of me he believed in, the version he loved, trusted, and protected, even when I couldn't protect myself. Later that week, I met with the others. Not to talk logistics, but the emotional reality of what my decision meant. Namjoon asked if I had thought it through. Not because he doubted me, but because he wanted me to decide from clarity, not pain. I have, I said. He nodded, quiet pride in his eyes. Then go, before guilt convinces you to stay. Each member gave their own quiet support. Hugs, jokes, promises to live fully. But the promise I made to Jungkook that one carved itself into my bones. He asked for only one thing: come back as yourself, not as an idol, not as a performer, not as the image Korea demanded, but as me, the version of me he had never let go, even when I couldn't hold on to myself. And that was when I knew my decision was irreversible. I wasn't leaving because I was unhappy. I was leaving because I wanted to feel alive again. Sometimes the place that raised you can no longer hold the person you've become. Sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who push you toward the door. Jungkook didn't beg me to stay to cage me. He begged me to stay because he feared losing me in a life that would break me. And love, real love, is letting someone go so they can return whole. That's what leaving Korea meant for me, returning to myself. Even after talking to Jungkook and the members, the weight of my decision didn't lift. If anything, it grew heavier. Leaving Korea wasn't a simple act. It wasn't a flight from discomfort or a rebellion against expectations. It was the accumulation of years where I felt pieces of myself slipping away unnoticed, unclaimed, until finally they demanded recognition. The moment I acknowledged it, I could no longer ignore the truth. I had to step away. I remember lying in bed the night before I told anyone outside Jungkook and the members. Staring at the ceiling, listening to the city hum softly through my window. The cars, the distant voices, the faint clatter of someone walking below every sound anchored me to a place I loved so fiercely it hurt. And yet, I felt suffocated by it. I felt torn between loyalty to the life that built me and loyalty to the person I was becoming. Korea was the birthplace of my art, my discipline, my resilience, my brothers. But it was also the center of every expectation that had shaped me into someone I no longer fully recognized. I realized that I had been living a version of myself that other people could approve of, while the real me had been shrinking quietly, hidden behind a smile and perfection that weren't mine. I turned onto my side and thought about the boy I used to be, the one who practiced in front of mirrors for hours, the one who apologized for things he didn't even do, the one who believed that endurance was love and suffering was nobility. And I wondered, if that boy could see me now, what would he think? Would he understand why I needed to leave? Would he be proud? Or would he blame me for wanting something different? Before I could dwell further, my phone buzzed. Not a message, not a call, a video notification from Jungkook, one of those random clips he sends when words aren't enough. I opened it. It was a recording of us performing years ago, practice room footage, unpolished, raw. I saw myself at 19, 20, singing with all the energy and joy that had once consumed me. I was smiling, truly smiling, not the polite, measured smile of an idol, not the one expected by the world, but the one that came from the pure, unfiltered love of music. No caption, no explanation. I didn't need one. I knew why he sent it. He missed that version of me. And I realized I missed it too. Jungkook had always seen the parts of me I had let slip through my fingers. He had carried the pieces I dropped without noticing, and now he was reminding me of them. I watched that clip over and over, memorizing the brightness in my eyes, the looseness in my movements, the unrestrained laughter. And quietly, without pain, something inside me shifted. The last excuses I had been hiding behind dissolved. I knew I had to tell him. The next day, I went to the studio early. Before anyone else arrived, I sat on the floor of our old rehearsal room. The smell of dust and memories filled the air. I could see us there, back when chaos and laughter were our companions, when silent promises wove themselves into our routines, when we swore as kids that we would never give up on each other. I whispered aloud to the past, I'm leaving, but I'm not leaving you. The room didn't answer, but the silence felt sacred, like it understood. Jungkook arrived not long after. Hair messy, hoodie half zipped, eyes already searching mine for the truth he expected. You're early, I said. So are you, he replied. We sat across from each other on the floor, the room heavy with anticipation. I didn't ease in. I didn't soften the words. I'm leaving Korea. He inhaled sharply, the kind of breath you take before the world shifts. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just looked lost. How long have you known? A while. And you didn't tell me? I couldn't. Couldn't or didn't want to. I didn't want it to be real, I admitted, voice barely audible. He nodded slowly, as if that was the answer he had expected but hoped he wouldn't hear. Silence thickened, suffocating, yet intimate, until he finally asked the question he had feared most. When are you going? I don't know yet, but soon. How soon? Soon enough that I can feel it already. He laughed a hollow, broken laugh without amusement. Do you know the worst part? What? You made the decision alone. I felt the sting of truth. I had to. No, he said quietly, firmly. You didn't. You just thought you did. I didn't know how to respond, so I listened. You always carry everything alone, he continued. Every fear, every doubt, every pressure, you think sharing it will make you a burden. You think we'll worry too much. You think it's your job to hold everything together. But sometimes, sometimes I want to carry you too. Something in me cracked. I whispered, you're not losing me. Then why does it feel like I am? Because you're the person I love enough to break for, he said. This decision would be easier if you didn't exist in my heart the way you do. Because distance terrifies me more than anything when it comes to you. All I could manage was, I'm doing this so I don't disappear. His eyes widened, pain flickering. You think staying will make you disappear? Yes. Then I won't ask you to stay. And that was the moment I knew love was real. Not poetic, not romanticized, but aching and healing at the same time. It wasn't about keeping each other safe from the world. It was about trusting that love could survive truth, that love could survive distance, that love could survive the fear of letting go. After that, I spoke with the members individually. Namjoon listened with calm intensity, processing my words like a poem unfinished. Yoonji nodded quietly, offering his reassurance without judgment. Hoseo cried, embracing me like he was shielding me from the weight of my own decision. Jimin cupped my face and whispered, just be happy, okay? Tai stared at me as if memorizing my features for times we wouldn't share together. But the conversation that lingered the longest, the one replayed in my mind every night, was the one with Jungkook. The way his fingers trembled when he reached for me. The way his voice broke when he admitted he didn't want to lose me. The way he whispered that he would wait not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. It was then I realized the truth. I hadn't admitted even to myself. I wasn't leaving Korea to escape. I was leaving to find a version of myself worthy of the love Jungkook kept giving me. The version he had always believed in. The version I owed to myself. And maybe, just maybe, distance would become the bridge that saved me. The morning I decided to tell the company felt like walking into a storm I couldn't predict. The building, every hallway, every office, every floor I had traversed for over a decade suddenly felt like a museum of my own life. Cold, quiet, echoing my footsteps like reminders that nothing stays the same. Leaving Korea wasn't just stepping out of a country. It was stepping away from the version of myself that had kept the machine running, the version that smiled when tired, performed when exhausted, and survived under weight I barely admitted existed. I walked past rooms labeled choreography, styling, A&R, management, content. Every door held memories. I had laughed, cried, trained, and dreamed within those walls. And now they felt foreign, almost sacred. I paused in front of the practice room, the floor scratched from years of our dance, the mirrors slightly smudged with sweat and laughter. I knelt briefly, touching the floor like I could absorb it into me one last time. I whispered to the empty space, I'm leaving, but I'm not leaving everything we built. The meeting room smelled faintly of coffee and corporate polish. Several executives were already seated. Their polite smiles didn't yet know the weight of the words I carried. I bowed slightly and took a seat, heart hammering like it wanted out of my chest. What's on your mind, Taehyung? One of them asked, casual, unaware. I drew in a breath that felt like a lifetime. There are moments when truth feels like a stone stuck in your throat. Too heavy to swallow, too sharp to speak. But I need to say it. I am moving out of Korea. The reactions varied. Surprise, concern, curiosity, calculating eyes that tried to measure the impact, both personal and financial. I expected anger, but there was none. Just a thick silence, heavy with questions left unspoken. Are you unhappy here? One asked. No. Struggling? Yes, but not because of you. Do you want a break? No, it's not a break. Is the group involved? No, this is my decision. What does this mean for future activities? I will participate just from another home. The questions continued, practical, emotional, layered. I answered honestly, carefully. Each word was an anchor, each phrase a tether to reality. It stretched for over an hour, delicate negotiation without resentment, carefully weaving my truth into their structure of rules and schedules. By the end, they nodded, quietly accepting. One of them said softly, take the time you need, but don't disappear. That last line hit differently. It wasn't a warning, it was recognition, fear, care, understanding. The same fear I had seen in Jungkook's eyes. The same fear the members carried quietly. The same fear I felt for myself. To leave wasn't abandonment. It was survival, growth, reinvention. And yet, survival can feel like disappearance when the life you've known is your anchor. After the meeting, I stepped outside into the cold morning air. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that feels both oppressive and cleansing. I breathed in deeply, letting the chill fill my lungs. Let the air carry away the weight I had carried for months. And then, familiar as ever, I heard his voice behind me. You told them. I turned. Jungkook stood there, hands in his pockets, expression a mixture of pride and heartbreak. I had memorized. How did you know? He shrugged slightly, but his eyes told me everything. The quiet certainty that comes from knowing someone so deeply it becomes instinct. We began walking side by side, letting the silence speak. It was a language we both understood, the pauses, the glances, the weight of what wasn't said. After a while, he stopped. So it's real now? Yes, I replied. My chest tightened. I don't have the date yet, but soon. He clenched his jaw. How soon is soon? Soon enough that I'm preparing myself. He stared at me as if trying to memorize the essence of me, the expressions I might leave behind. Then he asked a question I had been dreading. What happens to us after you go? I had rehearsed an answer in my mind 1,000 times, and yet when the moment came, none of it felt enough. We don't end, I said finally. We just learn a new way to exist. He laughed softly, humorless. You make it sound easy. It won't be, I admitted, but staying is breaking me. I can't survive like this anymore, not without losing pieces of myself you've loved so fiercely. He looked at me, eyes glistening. I never ask for perfect. I just ask for you to stay. I know, and I'm still living. He turned his gaze away, blinking hard. I hate this, he whispered, but I understand. We began walking again, the cold of winter biting at our faces, our silence between words more intimate than conversation. At some point, he tilted his head to the sky. You know, he said softly, I waited. I'll be here, even if it's hard, even if it hurts. I reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead, an almost involuntary gesture. He leaned into it, eyes closing, trusting, surrendering. I have to find myself again, I whispered. Not because of me, he asked. Because of me, I said. His hand found mine, tight, grounding. Then go, he said softly, and when you come back as you. Those words became my anchor, the promise I carried forward through doubt, fear, and every exhausting day, the knowledge that leaving Korea wasn't betrayal or abandonment, it was a return to myself, to the version Jungkook had always seen and never let me forget. In the days that followed, I visited the places that shaped me, old practice rooms, the streets we wandered as trainees, restaurants where laughter and tears shared space. Each corner reminded me of a chapter of my life, a story written in sweat and music and brotherhood. And I whispered to each memory, I'm leaving, but I will carry you with me. It wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the start of a journey, one where I could heal, grow, and become the person who could return whole. Jungkook didn't try to cage me. The members didn't demand I stay. They loved me enough to let me go, even as their hearts ached. That is the truest love I have ever known. Letting go, trusting, believing, and waiting. Even after the company meeting, even after walking alongside Jungkook along the Han River, the weight didn't lift. It settled differently, quieter but deeper, like a stone resting in the hollow of my chest. Leaving Korea wasn't a single moment. It was a collection of moments, memories, and unspoken truths that demanded acknowledgement. I knew the hardest part was yet to come, telling my parents. My family had always been the foundation of everything I had built. They had supported me, guided me, and loved me unconditionally, but they had done so with the belief that the path they had chosen for me, the life of dedication, sacrifice, and success, was the only one worthy of pursuit. And now I had to tell them I was stepping off that path, not because I was lost, but because I needed to find the person I had become along the way. Sitting across from them at the dining table, I felt the weight of generations behind me, the quiet clink of cutlery and the hum of the refrigerator created a strange intimacy, the kind that amplifies truths waiting to be spoken. I inhaled and exhaled slowly, feeling the years of gratitude, guilt, and love intertwine into a single knot in my chest. I I've decided to move out of Korea. I said finally, my voice trembling slightly, betraying the calm I had tried to cultivate. They paused, as if the air itself needed to process my words. My mother's eyes softened, searching mine for hesitation. My father leaned back slightly, hands folded, watching me like he was measuring both my courage and my truth. You are not leaving home, my father said quietly after a long pause. You are expanding it. I blinked, overwhelmed by the simplicity and depth of that statement. My mother reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Find where you can breathe, she whispered. Those words, gentle, unconditional, felt like a permission I hadn't realized I was craving. They weren't asking me to leave. They were asking me to live fully, to honor myself as fiercely as I had honored them. Even with their blessing, the emotional weight remained. Memories surfaced everywhere I went. Every street corner, every old practice room, every tiny restaurant we had eaten at as trainees, their scents and sounds wrapped around me in invisible threads, tying me to a past I was ready to live but wasn't ready to forget. I revisited the old Big Hit building alone, wandering hallways that had shaped my youth, every echo of laughter, every argument, every whispered promise between members lingered like ghosts that refused to vanish. I entered the practice room where we had spent countless nights dancing until our bodies couldn't move, singing until our voices cracked, dreaming until sleep escaped us. The mirrors reflected not just my face, but every version of myself that had passed through this room. I knelt briefly, letting my hands brush against the floor, inhaling the scent of sweat and memories. I'm leaving, but I'm not leaving you, I whispered. In the days that followed, I spoke to each member individually. Namjoon met me first, walking through the city streets in silence until he finally said, "You're scared to disappoint someone." "Who?" I asked softly. "Jungkook," he replied, no surprise in his voice, only understanding. His gaze held a quiet approval. "He'll be hurt, yes, but he won't be broken. The love you share, it's bigger than distance." Hoseo hugged me tightly, tears spilling over before I could even finish my words. "Growth always feels like breaking at first," he he whispered. Sukin cupped my face, looking into my eyes as if memorizing every contour. Just be happy, he said, no matter where you go. Taehyung smiled faintly, eyes glistening with unspoken emotions. Just promise you'll live, not survive, live. And then there was Jungkook. Every conversation I had with him carried the weight of unspoken truths. The tremor in his fingers when he reached for me, the way his voice cracked but held steady, the fear in his eyes and the faith behind it, all of it etched into me. The night we met again at the Han River, the cold wind biting our faces, his words broke me in the way only he could. I don't want you to go, he admitted quietly. I have to, I whispered, not because of you, because of me. He looked away, swallowing hard. Then, how do I hold on? By trusting me, I said. By knowing that living isn't leaving us. It's letting me return whole. He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. The distance we were about to face wasn't just physical, it was emotional. A challenge to the foundation of trust and love we had built over years. But there was a quiet courage in his surrender, the same courage that had always held me steady when I doubted myself. In the final week before leaving, I walked alone through neighborhoods filled with memory. Every corner reminded me of laughter, arguments, shared dreams. I sat in the quiet of a small cafe we used to frequent as trainees, the walls still echoing faint traces of our voices. I wrote letters in my mind, unsent, to every version of myself, to the members, to my parents, to Jungkook, words that captured gratitude, love, fear, hope. Words that I couldn't say aloud yet, but that shaped my resolve. Packing my things felt surreal. Clothes, props, notebooks, mementos, each item a fragment of a life I had lived under constant expectation. As I folded shirts and stacked them neatly, I realized the true weight wasn't in the items, but in the memories they carried. Every laugh, every argument, every stage, every practice stored in invisible pockets within me, ready to travel across borders, ready to sustain me in moments when doubt creeps in. The night before departure, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, overlooking a city that had raised me. The lights flickered like distant stars, echoing the vibrancy and chaos of the life I was leaving behind. My phone buzzed a video from Jungkook. It was one of our practice sessions from years ago, unpolished, raw. I watched, letting the memory wash over me. My younger self, smiling without restraint, moving with freedom, singing with all the hope of a boy who believed music could carry him anywhere. I replayed it over and over, letting it remind me who I was and who I could become again. Jungkook hadn't added words. He didn't need to. The message was clear. He saw me, all of me, even the parts I had lost in the demands of fame. I missed him, and I knew he missed me too. But there was trust woven into every pixel of that video, a reminder that love could exist across distance, that bonds could hold even when hearts are apart. That night, I whispered to the city, to the past, to myself, I'm leaving, but I will return whole. I promise. And for the first time, the fear felt lighter. The weight of expectation, of duty, of performance softened under the realization that I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was returning to the part of myself that had been silent for too long, the part Jungkook had always believed in, the part that deserved to breathe freely. The day finally arrived. The sunlight filtered through my apartment window in soft, forgiving beams, as if the city itself understood the gravity of what I was about to do. I packed the last of my things into the car, each bag heavier than the last, not with weight but with memories. Every hoodie, every notebook, every pair of shoes carried fragments of a life that had been meticulously structured, disciplined, and performed. Jungkook arrived early, unannounced, as he often did when he knew words would be inadequate. He didn't knock, he just entered, eye scanning the room until they found me. There was a quiet intensity to his presence, the kind that made everything else fade into the background. I could see the storm behind his eyes, the fear, the longing, the unspoken pain, and I hated myself for being the one to bring it. "You sure you're ready?" he asked softly, hands buried in his pockets. His voice carried that same calm firmness, the kind that demanded honesty. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, trying to sound certain, though my chest felt like it had been hollowed out. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked over and placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, grounding both of us in the present. The silence stretched between us, heavy but necessary, filled with all the words we couldn't say. I wanted to tell him everything, the fears, the doubts, the guilt, but I also knew that these weren't words that could fix anything. This was about trust, about letting go without losing the essence of us. When the car arrived, my parents were there. Their eyes were calm, proud, and tinged with the same sadness I felt. They didn't hug me, didn't try to stop me. They simply let me know with quiet gestures that they believed in my choice, in the person I had become, and in the person I was striving to find. My father's final words as I slipped into the back seat echoed in my mind, "Go, find where you can breathe." The ride to the airport was quiet. Jungkook sat beside me, not holding my hand, not touching me, just present. Every glance he gave me was loaded with everything we hadn't said aloud. I could feel the tension in his shoulders, the effort to restrain the emotions threatening to spill over. I wanted to tell him that this departure wasn't about leaving him behind. It was about returning to myself so I could be whole for both of us. At the terminal, the bustle of travelers and rolling suitcases felt surreal. The world outside our carefully controlled environment moved with relentless indifference. Yet, in that chaos, the reality of my decision crystallized. I was stepping into the unknown, leaving behind a life meticulously mapped out for a decade, carrying nothing but memories, love, and a desperate need to rediscover who I was beneath the persona the world demanded. We walked toward the gate together, our steps synchronized in silence. Jungkook finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Promise me, come back as yourself." "I promise," I said, gripping his words as if they were a lifeline. The announcements for boarding echoed through the terminal. My stomach twisted as we approached the gate. When the moment came for me to walk forward, I paused. He stepped closer, hesitated, and finally placed his hand over mine. Our fingers interlaced, the warmth of his touch grounding me as the weight of reality pressed in. "Take care of yourself," he said. "No matter what happens, remember who you are." "And you," I whispered back. take care of yourself too. The final boarding call sounded. My heart ached in a way I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't fear of leaving Korea, it was the ache of leaving someone who had seen every layer of me, who had believed in the parts I couldn't see myself, who had carried my fragments with unwavering faith. We let go, not abruptly, but slowly, each hand releasing the other, as if exhaling a shared breath we'd been holding for years. I turned and walked down the jetway, each step weighted with both anticipation and nostalgia. The cabin lights reflected in my eyes as I found my seat, and I felt the plane rumble beneath me, a low vibration that seemed to resonate with the tremor in my chest. Once airborne, the city below shrank into a patchwork of lights and memories. I pressed my forehead to the window, watching familiar streets, familiar rooftops, the neighborhoods where I had grown, learned, and dreamed. I thought of every late night practice, every laugh, every argument, every stage that had shaped me, and I felt the ache of leaving, the sharp tug of absence, but also a quiet exhilaration, the kind that comes from taking control of your own story for the first time in years. Jungkook's last text came through mid-flight. I'll be here waiting for you always. I read it over and over, letting the words settle into the core of me. His belief in me, his trust, his love, it wasn't a tether, it was a shield, a reminder that leaving didn't mean losing. As the plane cut through clouds, I closed my eyes, imagining the version of myself I had left behind and the one I was about to meet. The boy who had dreamed in practice rooms, who had smiled without restraint, who had sung with his whole heart, I carried him forward, determined to find him again. Arriving in a new city felt both foreign and liberating. The air was different, unfamiliar, carrying a scent of possibilities I had only dreamed of. Each step through the airport, through the streets, through the new apartment I had rented, felt like a small act of rebellion and reclamation. This was not an escape. This was an awakening. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, each item placed on a shelf or folded in a drawer felt symbolic, a quiet assertion of autonomy. I stood in the middle of the empty apartment, the silence vast and comforting. For the first time in years, I could breathe without performance, without expectation. I could simply exist. Messages from Jungkook, the members, and my family trickled in throughout the day. Each one reminded me that connection didn't require proximity. Love didn't require constant physical presence. And most importantly, that the bonds I had spent years building would endure because they were rooted in trust, understanding, and authenticity, not routine, not schedules, not shared stages. That night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering like distant stars. I thought of Jungkook's hands, of his gaze, of the trust he had placed in me. I whispered into the quiet apartment, I'm doing this not to live, but to return whole. I'm doing this to live again. And in that moment, with the city breathing around me and memories gently pressing in, I felt the first taste of freedom, the first step toward the version of myself I had been chasing silently for years. The version Jungkook had always believed existed, even when I couldn't. The first few days in this new city felt like breathing underwater. Everything was bright, alive, and yet unfamiliar. sounds, scents, even the way people moved through streets. It was foreign in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. I spent hours walking, letting the city absorb me, trying to understand my place in it. Every step reminded me that this wasn't Korea, that my life here would be shaped differently by choices I made rather than expectations imposed on me. Nights were the hardest. The quiet of my apartment was deafening compared to the constant hum of schedules and rehearsals I had lived with for years. I'd sit by the window, staring at the skyline, replaying every conversation, every glance, every unspoken word with Jungkook. I missed him, yes, but it was deeper than that. I missed the certainty of being understood without explanation. That trust had been my anchor, and now I was adrift in a sea of self discovery. I began to write again. Not lyrics, not scripts, not the polished content I was used to sharing with the world, but journal entries that traced the contours of my mind and heart. I wrote about the small things, the way sunlight hit the floor at a certain hour, the smell of coffee in the morning, the feeling of being unobserved for the first time in over a decade. These little observations became a meditation, a way to reconnect with myself and reclaim the fragments I had lost under layers of duty and expectation. Sometimes Jungkook would call late at night. Our conversations weren't long, weren't filled with declarations or grand promises. They were small, simple, a shared laugh, a sigh, a brief exchange about a song we remembered performing, or a moment in the past that only we could truly understand. But those moments kept him close, kept us tethered even when miles stretched between us. Every call reminded me that distance didn't diminish the weight of care or love, it simply tested it. I also began exploring music again in the way I had before the world demanded perfection. I picked up instruments I hadn't touched in years and let my fingers find melodies without thought, without pressure. My voice, my real voice, not the one shaped for stages or cameras, found its way through small rooms and empty streets, filling spaces I had long neglected. Each note carried memories, grief, hope, and the faint but growing pulse of self acceptance. One evening, after an entire day lost in improvisation, I paused and recorded a snippet. No audience, no fans, no expectations, just me, a guitar, and the unfiltered sound of my own heart. Listening back, I realized something profound. Leaving Korea hadn't erased my past. It hadn't broken the connections I had built. It had given me room to breathe, to heal, to rediscover what it meant to create from joy rather than duty. And yet, every breakthrough was tempered by longing. I missed Jungkook in ways I couldn't articulate, not just the comfort of his presence, but the quiet confidence that he understood me fully. I missed the small gestures, the way he would hand me a water bottle without asking, the subtle glance across the room that said he was aware of every layer I hid, the way he could read my energy better than I could myself. I realized that part of rediscovering myself meant acknowledging how much of my strength came from having someone who believed in me wholly. Emails and calls from the members reminded me that I wasn't leaving them behind either. Each message carried their unique fingerprints: Namjoon's analytical encouragement, Yoongi's understated support, Hoseok's emotional honesty, Jimin's playful but sincere care, Jin's quiet wisdom, and Jungkook's unwavering presence. Their words anchored me, reminding me that bonds forged over years aren't limited by geography. Love, loyalty, and understanding transcend distance, they evolve. The first week turned into two, and routines slowly began to form. I explored new neighborhoods, tried new foods, and even met a few local musicians who were unaware of who I was, allowing me the strange, exhilarating freedom of being anonymous. There was a lightness in that invisibility, a freedom to make mistakes, to laugh, to simply exist without expectation. And yet, every night, Jungkook's presence lingered in my mind, his voice, his concern, the quiet faith he had placed in me. Then, one rainy afternoon, I found myself walking by a small park. Children ran through puddles, their laughter sharp and bright, cutting through the monotony of a gray day. I paused on a bench, letting the rain soak through my jacket, letting the cold air wake me from the haze of self-doubt. I thought of the boy I used to be, the boy who had dreamed with abandon, who had sung in empty practice rooms, who had loved without fear, and I realized that I was beginning to meet him again. I picked up my phone to call Jungkook but hesitated. I didn't need him to hear my thoughts. I needed to say them to myself first. I whispered into the phone as if he were on the other end. I'm starting to find him again. The one I lost in schedules, in expectations, in fear, and in that silence, I felt a shift. I didn't need permission to exist fully anymore. I was claiming my space, my identity, my voice. Later that night, I finally allowed myself to watch videos. Jungkook had sent me the practice room recordings, snippets from early performances, moments captured in chaos and laughter. I saw us then, the joy, the passion, the raw energy unpolished by cameras or expectations. Tears came quietly, not from sadness, but from recognition. I had remembered what it felt like to love what I did without fear, to be present, to simply be me. Jungkook called just as the city lights reflected on the wet streets outside my window. We didn't rush into conversation. Instead, we let the silence stretch, each of us listening to the subtle rhythms of the other's life. Finally, he spoke. Are you finding him? I am, I said, and I think I'm finding myself too. He exhaled, long and slow. I just want to make sure you know you're not alone, even if you're not here. I know, I whispered, and that's why I can do this. Because I carry you with me not in place, but in trust, not in control, but in faith. You've given me that, Jungkook, and I'm learning to give it to myself too. We laughed softly, a quiet acknowledgement of distance and closeness, loss and gain. That night, for the first time since leaving, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: balance. The precarious kind that comes from taking a leap without knowing the outcome, but trusting that the foundation beneath you, love, connection, self-belief, will hold. The weeks turned into months. Adjusting to life abroad wasn't easy. There were moments of loneliness, nights when the absence of familiarity made my chest ache. There were times I questioned whether this decision had been right. But every challenge, every moment of doubt became a reminder that growth required space, that rediscovery demanded distance. Jungkook remained a constant, not through proximity, but through understanding. Messages, calls, small video clips, and shared memories became threads connecting two lives now lived apart, yet deeply intertwined. His belief in me wasn't a tether, it was a lifeline, a reminder that living doesn't mean losing, and absence doesn't mean detachment. Through this distance, I began to redefine what it meant to be Taehyung, not the idol, not the performer, not the image, but me, the boy who loved music, who laughed freely, who dreamed without fear, the man who loved deeply, who trusted completely, who risked leaving everything familiar to reclaim himself. And in that reclamation, I discovered something I hadn't realized I was missing: freedom to be whole, freedom to grow, freedom to return someday without losing what had always been most precious. Months passed, and life began to feel less like survival and more like presence. Each day carried a rhythm shaped by choice rather than obligation. Mornings started with music, not alarms. Afternoons were spent exploring streets and studios at my pace. Evenings became moments for reflection, sometimes silent, sometimes shared with Jungkook over calls that stretched into the early hours. Every interaction reminded me that connection isn't defined by proximity, it's defined by intention. I remember the first time I performed outside Korea. It wasn't a polished concert or a broadcast meant to impress millions. It was a small showcase at a local studio with a handful of people who had never heard my name. I felt vulnerable in a way I hadn't in years. There were no expectations, no preconceptions, only the pure act of creation. The moment my voice filled the room, I realized something profound. I had been performing for years, but I hadn't been singing for myself. Now I was. Jungkook had watched snippets I recorded, sending texts that were simple but loaded with meaning. That's the voice I've always known. Even across continents, his words carried weight. They weren't praise, they were recognition, acknowledgement that the version of me he believed in was finally emerging. It wasn't easy. I often questioned my choice, the distance, the impact on relationships back home, but moments like this reminded me why leaving had been necessary. I also began journaling about the people I had left behind: my BTS brothers, my family, my fans. Writing about them didn't diminish the distance, it honored it. Each page was a meditation on what I had carried for so long: loyalty, love, responsibility, and the constant weight of expectation. The more I wrote, the more I realized that leaving Korea hadn't severed these bonds, it had reframed them. Distance was no longer a barrier, it was a lens, a way to see clearly what had always mattered. Calls with the members remained consistent, though filtered through new boundaries. Namjoon was analytical as ever, always dissecting every decision with care and asking questions I hadn't considered, not to doubt me, but to ensure I was making choices from clarity, not fear. Yoongi's understated support came in late night messages, in small advice, in the quiet acknowledgement that he trusted me to navigate this path. Hoseok, ever the heart of the group, would send long rambling texts full of encouragement and the occasional joke to remind me to breathe and to laugh. Jimin's playful teasing masked a deep sincerity, always asking if I was taking care of myself, not just physically but emotionally. Jin's quiet wisdom reminded me to honor the past while embracing the present. And then there was Jungkook. He became my compass in this new world, not guiding me with instruction, but by presence. Even the smallest gestures, a late night text, a video of him playing the guitar, a picture from a rehearsal anchored me. They reminded me that living wasn't abandonment, it was an act of trust. He didn't try to pull me back. He allowed me the freedom I had been denied while simultaneously letting me know that no matter the miles, he was there. I began noticing subtle changes in myself. The way I walked, lighter with confidence, the way I laughed, unburdened, the way I created without self-censorship. I realized that years of being molded by schedules, cameras, and expectation had suppressed parts of me I didn't even know I was missing. Each day abroad was an excavation, revealing layers of creativity, vulnerability, and joy that had been buried beneath performance and duty. There were nights when the loneliness hit harder than I anticipated. On some evenings, I would lie awake, listening to the distant hum of the city, thinking about Korea, about the streets where we had laughed and cried, the practice rooms that had shaped us, the fans who had carried us, and the friends who had been my chosen family. The ache of missing them was tempered by the knowledge that this distance was not loss, it was growth. One afternoon, I visited a small cafe tucked between two narrow streets, a place where the walls were lined with vinyl records and dim Edison bulbs cast a warm glow. I sat with my notebook, sketching lyrics and melodies, and realized how much I had missed this freedom, the freedom to create without cameras, without schedules, without the weight of expectation. I recorded a few songs on my phone, each note resonating with memories, longing, and hope. These songs weren't meant for anyone but me at first, yet I knew they carried a piece of Korea, a piece of my brothers, and a piece of Jungkook in every chord. Late that night, Jungkook called. His voice was quieter than usual, hesitant, almost reverent. "I watched your snippet," he said. I I can hear you again. Not the Taehyung the world knew, but you." I swallowed hard, realizing that his faith in me hadn't wavered. His recognition wasn't tied to fame or expectation. It was tied to love, understanding, and belief. I confessed my fears to him, then the fear of distance, the fear of change, the fear that I might drift too far and never return. He didn't dismiss them. He didn't try to minimize them. Instead, he simply said, "Then I'll wait. I don't need you to stay in place for me. I need you to stay true to yourself." Those words struck a chord deep inside me. For the first time, I felt that freedom Jungkook had unknowingly given me in Korea, permission to exist as myself, not as an idol, not as a performer, not as a symbol, but as Taehyung. I began reaching out to fans in small ways, not through orchestrated campaigns, but through genuine connection. Messages, occasional videos, handwritten notes, simple acts that reminded me of the bond we shared without the interference of performance metrics. The feedback I received was humbling. They weren't upset I left. They understood. They wanted me whole, just as Jungkook did. That realization reinforced the truth I had been discovering for months. Love and loyalty aren't measured by proximity, they're measured by authenticity. Workshops and collaborations with local artists expanded my perspective. I learned new styles, new techniques, and even new approaches to songwriting. These collaborations weren't about competition or fame, they were about learning, growing, and contributing to music in ways that were meaningful. Every note I played, every lyric I wrote, every rhythm I explored was a step toward reclaiming a version of myself I hadn't known I had lost. Still, Korea lingered in my heart like a melody I could never forget. Memories of early mornings, late night rehearsals, laughter echoing down hallways, arguments softened by care, shared victories, and quiet moments with the members, all of it carried a bittersweet ache, but instead of being heavy, it became motivating. I realized that leaving Korea wasn't erasing those moments, it was honoring them by returning to them whole, stronger, and more self aware. Thank you truly from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for listening, for understanding, for walking with me through this story. Even when it's hard, even when it's uncertain, your love, your support, it's the anchor that keeps me steady even when life pulls me in every direction. I know this journey isn't just mine, it's ours. And every step I take, every choice I make, I carry you with me. So, thank you for believing in me, for loving me as I am, and for letting me share this truth with you. No matter where I go, no matter how far the distance, remember this. You are always part of my story, and I am always part of yours. Thank you for everything.